Back in the basement, going over unilateral harshness mitigation. That is the title I gave it. That is not like that's not technical. In option contracts. So um, I guess this does require kind of a review on unilateral contracts. I'm kind of hesitant to go over it because I just like don't see it being a major question because of uh like Vestal doesn't like unilateral contracts. They're they're not good contracts. And they're just very rare. Very rare is a true unilateral contract there. So I suppose I'll go over it a little bit. Um, but unilateral contracts essentially are open offers in which um, full performance concludes it, but any partial performance by anybody um, like does not conclude the offer. And so, for instance, like an example of a true unilateral contract is like a bounty hunter contract. And so, for instance, 400, 400K for Dirty Dan. If you can bring in Dirty Dan, you're getting 400K. And I mean, that's an offer if you really think about it. It's, yes, I will bring you Dirty Dan. And if you don't, then I mean, that's just what it is. So everybody can try to fulfill the offer. And typically speaking, there's only one person that gets the full performance, but there are instances where, you know, um, it can be kind of damning to put that out for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of example of a unilateral. Anyway, what is tough about that is like let's say Steve over here, like let's say Steve gets Dirty Dan, you know, like he's dragging Dirty Dan, right? And he worked hard for Dirty Dan. And he's like on the way up to like the county house, right? In which the sheriff is, he just like constantly keeps the suitcase of 400K on him. And and at the like before full performance of delivering this man to the county courthouse, the sheriff theoretically can revoke at any time and go, you know what, bounty's done. And there would be no remedy for he would be unhappy. There would be no remedy for Steve right here. And I mean, I'm sure Dirty Dan would be a little happy, right? Because he has no use for him anymore. But yeah, that's kind of the unjustness of the unilateral contract. Anywho, getting into now the restatements of it. Section 50 is the formation acceptance. So, section 2 of formation acceptance by performance requires that at least part of what the offer request be performed or tendered. It includes acceptance by a performance which operates as a return promise. And so this is mitigating part of the harshness of unilateral contracts because in this instance, right, this is almost near performance and revocation happened and there's no redress. What 50 does, it enforces that, well, partial performance in these instances can be enforceable. And so with applying section 50, Steve right here would get the 400K from the sheriff here. Okay, now going to option contracts. Section 25 option, the language of this one is an option contract is a promise which meets the requirements for the formation of a contract and limits the power to revoke an offer. And so when you think of option contracts, kind of just think of it as an extension of the offer. And so normally speaking, the offer over here, right? The offer over here, when it's sent out to the other person, they hold the power of acceptance, and it's usually it kind of dissolves, with time or whatever uh whatever restatement. What is it? 49? No, 41. Okay, whatever restatement 41 said. Um, and an option contract, what that kind of does is it says, well, the offer is going to be here. And if we do an option, you can give me something and I will keep this offer here. I can't, like, I won't revoke it. And so you can hold the power of acceptance for whatever negotiated time is there. And so my little definition defines what an option is. And again, like kind of like what I said, it's an option, aka you you limit your power of revocation for whatever like is negotiated for the option. Um, Section 45, option contract created by part performance or tender. And so subsection 1 reads, where an offer invites an offeree to accept by rendering performance. So not necessarily like handing a check right away, but maybe it's some kind of act that needs to be done in full, and does not invite a promissory acceptance. An option contract is created when the offeree tenders or begins the invited performance or tenders a beginning of it. And so this is kind of like relating to that unilateral mitigation of harshness. If there's an offer that says, you specifically, if you bring me Dirty Dan um, in person to me on my doorstep, I will pay you 400K. And you start, you bought all the supplies to like lasso in Dirty Dan because he's a wild man. And at that point, you've already started performance. They can't revoke at this point. So it kind of creates an offer or an option. And then 2, the offer's duty of performance under any option contract so created is conditional on completion or tender of the invited performance in accordance to the terms of the offer. And so, in other words, you start the performance, they can't revoke. And then once they fulfill full performance, once you bring Dirty Dan in, right, they have to oblige whatever the original offer was. Section 87. This one's a big one because of kind of our last few class sessions, revisiting options. But section 87 reads like how to do an option contract and what you need for an option contract. And so subsection 1 reads, an offer is binding as an option contract if it is in writing, signed by the offerer, it recites a purported consideration. So it needs to be additional consideration. This is a big thing. It can't be the same consideration for what the offer had done before. It has to be something additional. And so, for instance, if I offer to sell the car for 2,000 and I want you to keep that offer for me as an option, I would have to do additional consideration for it. And so maybe I say, here's $50 to keep it open for me for 2 weeks. Okay. And propose an exchange on fair terms within a reasonable time. So, an example of an unreasonable time, holding the offer open for the next 5 years. That's unreasonable and very unlikely a court would ever find that enforceable. Okay. Thus, you wouldn't have an option contract anymore. Subsection 2, an offer which the offerer should reasonably expect to induce action or forbearance of substantial character. Notice that this is in red text. On the part of the offeree before acceptance, in which does induce such action or forbearance, is binding as an option contract to the extent necessary to avoid injustice. And so getting kind of into like estoppel terms, but if the offer is you will do yard work for a year and I'll pay you at the end of it, right? I mean, you reasonably understand that I'm just going to do it, and at the end of it I understand that you're going to pay me, right? And so um when you start, right, when that performance starts, right, and like you are doing substantial work, there's a substantial work, right? If you did like a day of work and I revoke, it might be a little different. Maybe you did it for like a few months, and then it turns into an option where I can't revoke anymore. Um, uh, I'm gonna cover this in the next video, and then we'll get down to gap fillers, and then we'll do a stopple in one like separate video. And then we get to UCC, and then we'll do statute of frauds.